Welcome back, everybody. Hope you all had a good and restful holiday break. I always have this worry whenever I give an exam around this time that people were just working on my exam material during the break. And if you did, no judgment, but I just have this recurring nightmare. It's like students sitting just working really, really hard, and family calls out, says, "Time for Thanksgiving dinner." Says, "No, I got to work on my AIS exam." That's just the worry right there. Now maybe you enjoy doing that. Maybe you're just like, I hate turkey. What I really enjoy, I'll take it. All right. If that's you, then I don't know. Turkey's pretty good too. I got to be honest. All right. So before we get started, a couple of announcements real quick. So first of all, you probably received notice about the evaluations. We will actually have an opportunity in class. It's either going to be this Friday or next Friday. I haven't decided which yet. We're going to have an opportunity in class to do evaluations. So if you don't want to do them outside of class, that's fine. If you do rather do them outside of class, that's fine too. I do have some very specific requests on the evaluations. I'm not going to try to control what you say. So if you just want to just rag on me the entire time, you are more than welcome to. That is what you get the benefit of for this class. You get the chance to air all your grievances. Does anybody ever watch Seinfeld? The airing of grievances? Yeah, that's what the evaluations are, the airing of grievances. That's an opportunity for you guys, but I will give you an opportunity in class to do that, so you don't have to set aside your own time if you don't want to. I think, I don't recall if I sent out an email about it, but I didn't want to talk about this. We do have presentations coming up next week. So a couple things about the presentations. One thing I've already mentioned is during the presentations, I will be expecting everybody in the class to take notes. I think we're going to do the presentations in the other room. And the reason why is because it's just really hard to give presentations in this room, particularly if you're in the center of the room. All you see are these black monitors. It is really, really disconcerting. It's good for taking notes, but it's bad for presenting. So I think that's why we're going to do it in the other room. That being said, if you do have a laptop computer, then you are free to bring those along to take notes. Otherwise, you'll want to take really good notes, and you can take a picture and upload them. Regardless of what method you use, you will be taking notes on the presentation and uploading. And I think I've explained this already. This is not to make you do extra work. This is more along the lines of, I don't want students sitting in the classroom and doing other things other than listening to the presentations. Your colleagues, the co-students that you are here in the classroom with, they should be your primary focus during the presentation time, and that's my way of making sure that's the case. And so that's why we're going to be doing that. You're going to be taking notes. They're not meant to be detailed in analysis. It's 1 or 2 paragraphs per presentation, just enough to ensure that you're listening to what's going on and not scrolling up on social medias while people are presenting. If you are taking the final exam, you'll want to take notes anyway. You don't have to submit anything for the final exam, but you will want to take notes because there will be questions in the final exam from the presentations. So either way, you want to know that. Also in the presentations, I posted some presentation guidelines on Blackboard, Brightspace. Sorry, I'm still adjusting. But these are on Brightspace. And basically, you've got the oral presentation rubric, which you're probably already familiar with. I have some very specific opinions about what I look for in the oral presentations, so I gave you some guidelines. I know there's a lot of them. It's not really that thorough read. I do think that you should look through them, though, because I do have some very specific ones that are not necessarily obvious from the oral presentation rubric. So generally, the way I look at things is if it says very important, which there are a few of these things that say very important, please make sure you look at those and read through those in detail. Some of these are definitely more important than others. I expect everybody in this room to abide by the things that I say are very important. That's why I say they're very important. If it's other things, please make sure that you use good judgment on those. Like, for example, one of my guidelines is on slides using no more than 5 bullet points and 5 words to a slide, or 5 words to a bullet point. So no more than 5 bullet points, no more than 5 words per bullet point. If you don't follow that, I will not probably count you off unless it's egregious, unless you put a typewritten page on the slide. That's a little bit much, but that's just a guideline. Some of the things that I look for. These are general rules. Unless it says very important, you can use your discretion with this. You can your judgment. And I don't penalize nearly as much at the junior level as I would at the senior level or the graduate level. My graduate students, I'm going to talk about this next hour. I'm going to say you better follow my words to the letter. All right, that's what I tell them. But I'm a little bit more lenient on those, the junior level presentations, because again, I know you're not familiar with some of the people that you're working with, and it's a little bit more disaggregated. But I strongly recommend you read through these, everybody in the group, and make sure that your presentation follows that. Some of the things that I do look for is making sure you present for the same length of time, making sure that you are familiar with your resources, are familiar with your content, and not just reading from a page. I do think that the slides need to make sure that your slides should look consistent throughout. So different people will present different parts of the slides, but it's really, really distracting when you get one slide set that's in one font, another slide set that's a completely different font, which is obvious that different people are preparing the slides. So please make sure that that's the case. Your presentation should be coming from you, not from your slides. So you need to make sure that you're not just reading from a script, or you're not just pointing at the slides, looking at that. You should be engaging with the people in the audience, particularly one person in the audience who's very, very important, okay? And making sure that you're presenting in a conversational tone. Also, a couple things. Make sure that you are familiar with everybody in the group's presentation. I definitely recommend that you work together with the group and present all on your own. I may ask you a question that overlaps into another content area, and you may think, oh no, I don't know what this person presented on. How can I answer this question? Well, you should probably know what everybody in your group is presenting on and be familiar with the content. I don't hold you to that. You don't need to be an expert in that area, but you should at least be familiar with it. Probably the most important one, you'll see there's a big long blurb in black there in bold text, and it's italicized, and there's some underlines in there. If you go to ChatGPT and say, type me up a 2-paragraph summary of this that I can read for my presentation, and you come in and read that, there is a near 100% chance I'm going to ask you an extremely difficult question about that you are going to have to answer competently. And if you don't answer it competently, I will probably give you a 0 for your presentation, and I'll say, I'm not asking ChatGPT to do the presentation, I'm asking you to do the presentation. So I don't discourage you from using advanced tools. If you want to use a machine learning tool like ChatGPT to help you with this, go for it, okay? There's a lot of great resources out there. Ultimately, though, the presentation has to come from your lips, your mouth, your brain, right? Not from a script that's prepared by an external source. Does everybody understand what I mean by that? All right, so please make sure that you're very consistent on that. Again, read through the guidelines, they're pretty clear. I just want to take a moment to talk about that. Also, please make sure you've reached out to your group members by now. Hopefully by now, everybody started talking about who's responsible for different parts of the presentation, because they are coming up pretty quick. But before that, we have an exam. It's like only 2 weeks left. It feels like this should be the downhill slide. And I'm throwing 2 exams and a presentation at you all at once. So like just cruelty. There's just a level of cruelty there. Can I be agreed? Some people are just kind of nodding heads. Yeah, this is really cruel. So it's like, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. That's why they give you a PhD, to teach you how to be cruel. All right. So we got, yes.
Are we supposed to know and keep track whether we are taking the final or not, or are you notified?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So Friday we will come in. I will hand back your exams. I will also have some information on Brightspace. Hopefully I can post it. I will have some information on Brightspace. I'm still working on trying to figure out the grading mechanisms of Brightspace because they're not as intuitive as Blackboard. But I will tell you, basically, if you decide to opt out of the exam, what your provisional grade is. Now, the provisional grade is based on everything you've done in the class to a point, and the assumption that you're going to do perform a certain grade on the presentation, which is 40 points out of 50. That's, I think, the expectation. I think it's out of 50 points. I don't remember exactly. But a provisional grade on the presentation, and that you also submit the summaries that I'm asking you to do for the presentations. I will tell you, if you do all of that, here's the grade you'll have if you decide not to opt, or if you decide not to take the final exam. So that actually gives you a couple decision points. First of all, there will be people in the class who will see NA on that, and that means that you did not qualify for the exam, or to opt out of the final exam, so you will be with me during finals week. The other thing is, like, you might get a B or a C, and I might tell you you are really close to the next grade, but you don't have enough points to get bumped up to that. So you're like a 77, 78. So close enough to be like a C, but you did really well on the final exam, you can get a B. That will give you the opportunity to make that decision if you want to take the final exam. I will throw the caveat out there that I'm not going to discourage you from taking the final exam, but it is comprehensive, so it will cover everything in this course at the same level of detail that the exam's covered. So keep that in mind. That's an excellent question. I meant to mention that and I completely forgot. Yes.
Something like this normal exam?
Yes, it will be still be 100 points. It'll still be 20 questions. So I won't be covering everything in the same depth, but you will be responsible for the same level of detail. All right. So on this exam, we have 100 points, 20 multiple choice questions, okay, which are 60 points for 3 points each. It is going to be one quantitative or one qualitative problem. So the breakdown of the questions in the multiple choice is pretty straightforward. Everything has 3 questions, with the exception of chapter 11. Chapter 11 only has 2 questions. Remember, that was the chapter where we talked about visualizations, and then we did some work in Power BI. It's only 2 questions on chapter 11. Everything else, the other 4 chapters, Excel and NetSuite, all have 3 multiple choice questions associated with them, which is exactly the way the practice exam works. The qualitative problem will have it'll be one problem with 6 parts, which is very similar in format to what's on the practice exam. They will look very similar. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you the same questions because that would defeat the purpose of giving a practice exam. But it will look very similar in format. So if you were able to get to the practice exam and felt pretty good about it, you should be in good shape for the exam itself, because it's going to look very similar in form and content. All right, as always, I'm going to go through some high points on the study guide. If there's something on the study guide that you were unsure about and needed some clarification, please feel free to raise your hand and ask the question and stop me saying, what about this? I'm going to cover the things that I think are the most relevant that provide some detail. Everything that's on the study guide, though, is live for the exam. I can ask a question about anything. And I will tell you right now, I'm not going to talk about every single thing that's on the exam. So you're responsible for anything that's in the study guide. All right, so moving down to chapter 10, I want to move down to the AMPS model. Okay, one of the points of master of the data is what are the 4 types of data questions in this step? We didn't really talk about that outside the slides, but I think this is important to note. When we talk about mastering the data, remember this is our ETL step, extract, transform, and load, and this is where we're trying to clean and validate the data. So the 4 questions you had to ask, and this is in the slide. I don't remember what slide it was, but it's in the slides. It's on the master of the data slide. Data accessibility, data reliability, data integrity, and data type. Okay, I'll repeat those because I hear people typing. So data accessibility is the first one. Data reliability, data integrity, and data type. And there's explanations in the slide for this, but they are relatively straightforward. They follow the words. If you know what those words mean, you should understand what the questions are. Something that's very important in performing analysis, 4 types of analysis in the step. There were 2 questions on the practice exam. There will definitely be questions on the exam about this. Is about understanding each type of analysis and provide examples of each. So what were those 4 types? There's the descriptive analysis, the diagnostic analysis, predictive analysis, and prescriptive analysis. I'm going to talk more about those in the exam because there are a couple of questions that are in the practice exam, but I will give you some details. But be sure that you know all 4 of those types, not just their names, but what each of them do. All right, moving down to chapter 11, key types of visualization. You'll notice I talked about 6 types of visualization, as well as what types of visualizations they're meant to represent. Be sure that you know both types. I think in the explanation, I say, know the above types of visualization, identify examples, and specify what type of data is meant to represent. It could be the other way also. I could give you a type of data and say, what's an example of a type of chart? In fact, that's one of the questions in the practice exam. I do expect you to know all of these in there. Some of them are very straightforward. When I talk about geospatial data, that's very obvious. I'm talking about a map, okay? It's geography. Some of them are a little bit less intuitive. By the way, if I give you a question about univariate or multivariate, I won't ask you to make that interpretation. I will specify that it's a univariate analysis or a multivariate analysis. So you don't have to worry about that in case you're like, I don't know if I can identify univariate or multivariate. I got your back. Okay, I got your back on that. All right, moving on. Chapter 12. So remember we talked about 4 types of blockchain systems. This is not in the book. There's only 3 types in the book. You are responsible for all 4 types on the exam, okay? So we have 4 types: public, private, consortium, and hybrid. Public blockchain is permissionless and has no central authority. Private blockchain has a single central authority. Consortium has multiple authorities. It's usually set up by a group. And then a hybrid blockchain usually has one central authority, but usually involves a permissionless process. So it's a hybrid between public and private blockchains, basically what we're looking at there. So be sure you know those. Going down to machine learning, some things that I think are really important. I think this is in the practice exam, but what two types of tasks are machine learning systems able to perform? That's classification and regression. You should definitely know the difference in what each of those represents. What is a classification task? What is a regression task? So classification is basically saying yes, no, or what category does it fall into? Regression is trying to determine a value. And it doesn't necessarily need to be an actual quantitative value, but it should have quantitative characteristics. Then four types of machine learning. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about in this chapter. So there's likely to be a question. There was definitely a question in the practice exam. So there are 4 types. There's supervised, unsupervised, semi-supervised, and reinforcement. Supervised means you know what the output is. Unsupervised means you don't know what the output is. Semi-supervised means that you have incomplete data, and reinforcement learning is trial and error. So all of those are going to be things that you would need to know. So you need to know what are the 4 types and be able to explain what each of those represent. All right, internal controls. My opinion on internal controls, very, very important. Very dull and very tedious, but very, very important to understand. So 3 general categories of internal controls: preventive, or preventative as I like to say, either one. Detective and corrective. By the way, which 2 of these are often used in unison? Detective and corrective. Yeah, detective and corrective, because we detect a problem, we fix the problem. All right. So make sure you understand what each of those represents. Preventative stops a problem from happening. Detective says if there's a problem, we're going to identify it, and then corrective will fix the problem. All right. Also, what are 2 categories of IT systems controls? We talked about this all the way back in chapter 5, but we had general or access controls and application controls. And the definitions are provided in the slides again, but by now I think everybody knows this because we've talked about it in multiple chapters. 2 primary IT governance, or 2 primary organizational governance frameworks. Okay, so 2 primary organizational governance frameworks we're talking about from the perspective of internal controls. The one that you should know die hard is the COSO Internal Control Integrated Framework. I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. The other one is the COSO Enterprise Resource Management Framework. That's ERM. You do need to know what the additions are for the ERM, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the ERM framework, but you do need to know those. Yes.
Is it risk or resource?
Enterprise risk, or enterprise resource management. Sorry, I said risk, didn't I?
You said resource.
Enterprise, I think it's enterprise resource management. Maybe it's enterprise risk management. Okay. Yeah. ERM, I apologize. So yeah, I'm thinking of something else that's resource management. Thank you very much. Yeah, used to calling it just ERM. Basically, if you say ERM, that'll be fine. Because Dr. Barnes doesn't know the name of the framework. But the ERM framework. And then 3 primary IT governance frameworks. Okay, that's COBIT, ITIL, and ISO 27000 series. COBIT, remember, it's very broad. It's about IT governance. ITIL is about IT service management. And then ISO 27000 series is IT security, IT security systems, or IT security management. Probably the most important thing you can know in this entire chapter has to do with this line right here and these 3 dashes that are associated with them. COSO 2013. This will be something that every single one of you will encounter in the real world, regardless of where you're going for your job, because it is so prominent. So you do need to know this. This is one of my favorite things to talk about in this course. 100% chance this will be on the exam. What are the 3 objectives of COSO 2013? Remember, it's reporting, operations, and compliance. There's a little bit more detail, but that's all I ask you to know, the 3 objectives: reporting, operation, and compliance. 5 components. This is one that I will definitely ask a question on. Control environment, entities risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, monitoring. Be sure you know what those are. It's not enough to know the names of them. You do have to know what each of those represents, because it's really, really critical. So be able to identify and explain the purpose of all 5 components. There was a question on the practice exam. There's likely to be multiple questions on the exam about this, so make sure you're familiar with all. All right, chapter 14. Yes. Oh, so that's segregation of duty. And that's basically saying that there are 3 responsibilities that should be separated out. And we're talking about within one process area. It's like revenue process. So no one person should have multiple responsibility areas. So example would be, or CAR stands for custody of assets, recording of transactions, authorization of transactions. or custody authorization recording, custody of transactions, authorization transactions, recording of transactions. By the way, you may hear this from other sources. They may say it's ARC. They're wrong. It's always CAR. Okay, always CAR in this course. If you put ARC on the exam, I will just put an X in it. I won't take off any points, but I'll be very angry. Okay, be very angry. So don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. All right, good question. So on chapter 14, down here where it talks about some examples of external threats, cyber attacks, there's a big long list of these in the slides. You do not need to know the entire list, but there were some that I specifically talked about, some that were on the slides and some that were not on the slides. I do want you to be familiar with the ones that are on the slides and that I talked about, okay? The three that I specifically talked about: social engineering, data breaches, and ransomware. And the reason why I think those three are so important is because they're so incredibly prominent right now. All three of those are big. Yes?
Do they need to know a lot of information about those three, or just?
I would say be able to define them and then be able to identify examples of them. If I gave them a multiple choice question, I might say the following scenario is an example of social engineering or data breach or ransomware.
Social engineering, right?
So social engineering is basically trying to acquire data that you wouldn't have otherwise access to. It's often done through computerized systems through data mining. So you know those quizzes on Facebook that everybody enjoys? Say, yeah, what is your mother's maiden name? All right. What did people call you as a child? What street did you grow up on? That's an example of social engineering that's done through that, and that's used for nefarious purposes. By the way, if you've ever done those quizzes and answered those questions, that was a bad idea. Bad idea. Might want to go back and try to eliminate that and recheck all your passwords and change your security questions. All right. Symmetric key encryption versus asymmetric key encryption. So I say be able to define each type of encryption, explain how each type of encryption works. Basically, what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for, can you explain the depiction of the images that were on the slide? Remember, there were two different images, two different slides, and they had images, okay? One explained the symmetric key encryption, one explained asymmetric. The images were nearly identical. The big difference is that one used a private key in both scenarios. The other one used a private key, then a public key, or a public key, then a private key, excuse me. Public first, then private. So be able to explain what's happening in each of those situations, be able to provide a general definition of symmetric versus asymmetric, and you can also provide analogies to help strengthen that. I'm just basically looking for a basic understanding of the difference between the two encryption methods. Do you guys remember the analogies that I talked about in class? That was an easy way. So when I talked about symmetric key encryption, I said it's like a padlock. You have to have the exact key to unlock that padlock. For asymmetric, I said it's like an ATM card. You're accessing the same system that everybody else accesses, but you're using a unique identifier. That card and that PIN number you put in. Nobody else can use your PIN number. Hopefully nobody else can use your card. You have to have that private key to access the public system. All right, let's move down to Excel in class activities. So please make sure that you're familiar with all of these. These are all live questions, but I am going to tell you absolutely for certain 100%. I just looked at it like 15 minutes ago. There's maybe not like, maybe it's longer than that. 25 minutes ago. There we go. I looked on the exam and I saw this question on there. So I'm going to tell you that this question is on there. There will 100% be a question about the index match function. Okay. That was one of the more complicated functions we talked about in this course, but I think it's really important to note. So please make sure you are familiar with how this function works. The good news is if you don't remember it, there's a lecture about it on YouTube that you can access. I don't know where I'm pointing to. But yeah, it's on YouTube that you can access to look at the index match function. Please make sure you're familiar with it. I will tell you right now, I will not ask you to do the multi-tiered index match function. Remember that we did that last function. And I said, isn't this really cool? You can analyze on multiple dimensions. If I do an index match, it's a single index, single match. Okay, I want actually to do multiple nested functions there. But 100% chance I will ask you to do an index match function. That's one of the questions. There's two other questions that will come from the other content, but I'm not going to tell you what that's coming from. I'm just going to make sure you study all the rest of that. But I did want to make sure that was clear because that's a really complex topic. So study that, make sure you're familiar with it. All right, NetSuite assignments. I don't think I have any notes on here, but please make sure you look through that. All of it's fairly intuitive. If you walk through the NetSuite assignments, remember things we talked about, it should be straightforward. Hopefully you found the stuff straightforward in the examples. I will tell you, you do not need to panic too much if you don't remember specifically a task that we walked through. it should be somewhat intuitive. You should be able to look at the information and kind of walk backwards through it and say, I don't remember exactly what I did in NetSuite, but this is the only answer that makes sense. And I'll talk about that when we get to the multiple choice questions here in just a second. All right. Before I move on to the practice exam, are there any questions, any clarifications anybody needs in the study guide? All right, moving onward and upward, let's talk about the practice exam. All right. I realize this first question is kind of silly because it's a memorization question, but I think it's a really easy question and it's a really important question. So data analytics professionals estimate how much time they spend, how much of their time in data, cleaning data or perform analysis on it. So this is saying what percentage of the time in data analysis does the ETL process comprise? Does anybody remember what this was? 50 to 90%, okay, 50 to 90%, which seems like an extreme amount, but that was something to kind of reiterate the point. The data analysis, as much as we're concerned about the results, the big process is making sure we get it ready for the analysis process. Which of the following is not part of the AMPS model? You see what I did here? Okay, I gave AMPS there, but you had to figure out which one's incorrect. Okay, which one of these is not part of the AMPS model? Parse the data. It's actually perform the analysis. That's what should be there. So make sure you know the AMPS model. All right. So what type of data analysis is used to determine if something will happen in the future? So let's walk through these. I said I was going to do this, but I want to make sure we do this. So descriptive analysis asks the question, what happened? Okay. Diagnostic analysis asks the question, why did it happen? Predictive analysis says, what will happen? And then prescriptive analysis is, what should we do based on what we believe will happen or what we expect will happen? Make sure you know those 4 questions, because then you know those 4 questions. Answering this question is really, really easy. So I said predictive analysis is what will happen. Okay. So data analysis used to determine if something will happen in the future. Predictive analysis, just based on that question. Which statement best describes data visualization? So let's just walk through these. Data visualization was created to help accessibility issues? No, that's not true. Data visualization helps understand UML diagrams. Wouldn't it be great if we could have something that helped us understand UML diagrams? Those things are nasty. Yeah, but that's not what we're using here. Data visualizations is the process of presenting information through images. Well, this makes a lot of sense because we talked about how data by itself is largely incomprehensible. Even if we transform the data marginally, like we do in financial statements, it's still largely incomprehensible. So presenting through images is an easy way to present data to actually see what the story of the data is telling us. So data visualization, the process of presenting information to images, sounds like it's the correct answer. So let's just make sure we hold on to that. Data visualization is the way you put data into tables. It involves tables, but that's not the process. The process is taking the information that is in tables and transforming it into something that's meaningful. So C is our answer. C is our answer. Before preparing a visualization in Power BI, the user must verify the associations that exist between the data and the tables being used in the visualization. What view in Power BI is used for this task? So we had 3 views. Classification was not one of those, by the way. I threw that up there because I just had to have a 4th one. Okay. So we have data, relationships, and reports. So let's just talk about what each of these do. So remember the data table? That was actually the table that looks like it was an Excel file or a data analysis file. That's where we can manipulate the data, where we can add additional tables based on, additional fields based on existing fields. So say, for example, I want to have a total sales column and I only have quantity and price. I can calculate that, use a calculation to create a new field to do that. Relationships, the word relationship seems to be synonymous with associations. In fact, this is what we're looking at right here. This is where we see what the data is in the tables, what the different fields are within those tables, and what the associations are between those tables. We have to verify that the relationships are correct. So we're making sure that we've identified what the primary keys and secondary keys are across the tables, so that we can parse the data effectively within the view. And then the report, this is where we create the visualizations. That's just where we create the visualizations. Yes.
On the test, are all the answers going to be C? Also,
that's a good question. Answer is no. So I will say that it was happenstance for the first I think for the first 4 questions, and then I did it deliberately for this question. Okay. So there are a lot of C's. I realize that.
I thought relationship view was it's called model. But was I incorrect about that?
It can be called model view too, but it's actually got relationship and model view. I think the newer versions of Power BI call it the relationship view. But yeah, those are the views that we're looking at today. All right, which of the following is a key benefit of blockchain system? Is asynchronous update a key benefit? No, it's synchronous updating we'd be looking for, synchronous updating. Full transparency of the system. That would be a benefit. Yeah, absolutely. Single copy of the general ledger? No, we have multiple copies of the general ledger. Every system, every node on the blockchain actually has a copy of the general ledger. So multiple copies. Obviously, all of the above key benefits of the blockchain system, that can't be the answer, which I warned you about. Be careful when I put all of the above. Oftentimes I put it up there because I can't come up with a fourth answer. So I'm going to test your method. This is the case. That was the case here. That was the situation. It's not to say all of the above is never the correct answer. It's just rarely a correct answer on the exam. I'd say approximately 1 out of 4 times. Yeah, anyway, 1 out of 4 times. Just math. All right. A company and its key suppliers agree to set up a secure blockchain between them to facilitate purchase and return transactions. Which of the following types of blockchain would most likely or would likely be used in this situation? So you had to read the beginning. It said a company and its key suppliers. It sounds like we're talking about a group here, a group of authorities, which there's only one example that actually uses a group instead of a single authority. That's our consortium. Okay. Remember, consortium is basically many authorities are setting up the blockchain. Hybrid would be a one authority, but using a permissionless process. So again, aspects of both private and public. Private is one authority, and then public is no central authority. By the way, anybody's asking if I set up the answers to be just a specific way. Most of the times I set up the answers in alphabetical order to try to avoid any bias. I just thought it was funny on the 4th question that now they were all CM to that point, so I deliberately wrote the 5th question C. I created an answer that came before all those correct answers. Again, not on the exams, they will not all be C. Some of them might be. I don't honestly remember, but some of them might be. I really want to do that one day. Maybe when I retire, I want to actually do like 19 questions, all one letter, but one question not a one letter, and just really screw with my students. Say, would you do that? Would you just do one that's the incorrect answer? I would absolutely do that. Absolutely do that. But I'm not doing it to you guys. Yes.
I had a high school teacher who do that on quizzes.
Oh.
So half the people got that quiz, and then the other half of people got a normal one.
Yeah.
And so you sat there and you were like, "What's happening? Am I crazy right now?"
So that would be something like if you had back-to-back sections. Says, hey, the multiple choice questions are all C, and then you get a different version. Yeah, I can see that be an issue. Yeah. All right. Fun times. Get fun stories and anecdotes in this class. Fun stories and anecdotes. Dr. Barnes is a monster. All right. A bank has an external list of customer credit scores on hand. The bank uses machine learning techniques to develop its own credit ratings for each customer, which it compares to the external list. What type of machine learning is the bank using? So this is another question about the different types of machine learning analysis. You had to know the difference between these. So in this situation, there is a known output. They are creating credit scores based on the information they have and trying to compare this to what the output should be, which describes what type of learning. Supervised learning. This is a supervised learning technique. Remember, unsupervised would be no known output. Semi-supervised would be there's incomplete data. And then reinforcement learning is trial and error. Reconciliation of cash accounts may be referred as what type of control? So you guys have seen reconciliations before, reconciliations of cash accounts, especially if you're taking 302 and you worked at Dr. Eisen. Isn't this fun, guys? Yeah, that was my best Dr. Eisen impression, sorry. Yeah, so reconciliations of cash accounts, we're trying to actually see if there are any problems, which sounds like what type of control? Detective, it's definitely a detective control, There's no such thing as adjustive controls, by the way, it's not one I made up. In a computerized environment, internal controls can be categorized in which of the following. All right, so this should be obvious, you know the answers, but if it's not obvious, you can kind of do a process of elimination because detective and protective controls, those are 3 controls that are general environments. Network controls and transaction controls aren't really a thing. Primitive controls is a thing, but mandatory controls are not. General controls and application controls, that's our answer. Those are the ones for IT environments that we talked about. Fill in the blank. Something is or are characterized by actions and attitudes of individuals who lead the organization, characterized by the tone at the top. What is the component of the COSO framework that I'm talking about here? This is the control environment. Again, absolutely will be a question about this on the exam. There's a question here. Control environment basically says, what are the attitudes of the people who run the organization? Do they take control seriously? Because that filters down and permeates the rest of the organization. So control environment, probably the most important component of the COSO framework. Asymmetric key encryption uses which of the following techniques to users to communicate securely? Again, this is the one you kind of need to know the answer for, but it's actually a pretty easy question. It's a public key and a private key, right? So we know that that actually is what defines asymmetric key encryption. By the way, 16-bit encryption key, remember in our slides, it said they used a minimum of 128. I think the 16-bit was used like 1980s. Okay, that's 16-bit. That's like the Super Nintendo right there. That's, yeah. Digital signature, this can be created using an asymmetric key, but it doesn't, asymmetric key does not use a digital signature. It's the opposite direction. And then a message digest we didn't really talk about, but that's actually just a aggregation of digital signatures. Fill in the blank. Blank is an information security procedure that utilizes an algorithm to ensure that a file is identical in content to what was sent. We only talked about one of these types, and it was specifically said an algorithm that ensures that the files are identical. What was the definition? Hashing. That's what we were talking about, hashing there. Okay, the rest of these are actual things that are different or that I made up. Something I didn't make up is Cressy's hypothesis. So Cressy's hypothesis said trusted persons become trust violators when they conceive of themselves as having a financial problem which is non-shareable. Now, I'm not going to continue on because that was the important point. So that underlying phrase describes one of the components or one of the fraud risk factors or one of the components of the fraud triangle. Which one does it describe? What do you guys think? C, incentive pressure. Yes, that's correct. Okay. The rest of these are also present in there. The next part about where this problem can be secret resolved with violation of position of financial trust, that's opportunity, and are able to apply their own conduct and the situation verbalizations that are able to adjust their conception of themselves as trusted persons. That's attitude rationalization. As part of the Excel data analytics activity from chapter 10, we created a pivot table summarizing a set of journal entries to determine why transactions were being entered and approved by the same person. The reason I slowed down there is that phrase was very important. What type of data analysis did this activity represent? Well, if you remembered what we specifically talked about in that Excel assignment, you can say, oh yeah, that's what we talked about, blank analysis. If you don't remember that, there's the question, what type of analysis are we performing? And this one says, why did something happen? So what type of analysis answers the question, why did something happen? Diagnostic, B, okay? If you go back, that was actually our example of diagnostic analysis. For one of our Excel activities, we briefly explored a newer function in Excel, XLOOKUP, which the following describes one of the differences between VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP requires the user to specify an array, where XLOOKUP can use either arrays or columns for the search range. The opposite is true. Actually, XLOOKUP can use, requires the user to specify array. VLOOKUP can use either arrays or columns. That's one reason I like VLOOKUPs better, but XLOOKUPs is definitely more versatile. VLOOKUPs can only index based on vertically presented data, whereas XLOOKUPs can index both vertically and horizontally. What do you guys think about that? That sounds like the correct answer. It is, in fact, the correct answer. VLOOKUPs will return only exact matches in your search, whereas XLOOKUP defaults to finding approximate matches unless you specify otherwise. The reverse is true. If you remember when we did VLOOKUPs, remember that 0 that I told you had to put at the end of the equation? That specifies, sorry, false, not 0, false at the end of the equation. That specifies you're looking for an exact match. So VLOOKUP actually has to be specified. Otherwise, it will return fuzzy matches, which is really, really messy. XLOOKUP, on the other hand, only returns exact matches, which means D can't be correct because the only one's correct is B. All right, in the image, we got Excel rules and B Excel, and then we got this function. Which will be the result of the formula entry in C1? So it's a mid function. So what are we looking at for mid? So remember, the mid is actually just trying to tell, now again, we do have a length function here, but the mid is what we're focused on. Mid function is going to return something from this field. So we can go ahead and get rid of A and B because we're not calculating the length. We're actually trying to say what is in this. So it's either Excel or it's either rules exclamation point. So which one is it? Is it Excel or is it rules? Everybody went dead silent. Rules, it's rules. So what's happening here? Saying, look at A, all right? I want you to go length of this word here. So it says Excel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, add 1, which is 6, okay? And then I want you to start from there and move 10 spaces to the right. So RULES exclamation mark, blank, 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 but there are no blanks. So it's just gonna pick up everything. This was exactly what we did in the Excel assignment when I actually said, let's pull out the names. So I had Michael Barnes, Stacy Caden. I said, we can use this function to pull out the last names if we have the information about the first names. So exact same function that you can interpret from this function formula right here. One of the first tasks we performed in NetSuite as part of the purchasing process was to remove one of the defaults in accounting preferences. What was the purpose of this action? So you may or may not remember this. If you remember this, it's an easy question, but let's work through this. to ensure goods are not purchased until after customer orders are approved. Does this make any sense at all? No, we're talking about something in the purchasing process and then something in the revenue process, which don't overlap. So this doesn't make any sense. To prevent vendors from submitting invoices prior to delivering orders. Does that make any sense? That makes perfect sense. We do not want our vendors sending invoices before they've delivered orders. Otherwise, they may send an invoice and just conveniently forget to deliver the order. So that was something we actually did here, and that makes sense. That's our answer, but let's make sure we walk through the rest. Prevent purchasing personnel from submitting orders without departmental approval. Can a purchasing personnel actually submit an order if they don't have our department approval? No, department approval has to occur first. So department approval is implicit. So these are actually opposite in order. So it's fine if purchasing personnel can actually move forward because they already have department approval, because they have to receive the purchase order from somewhere. To avoid payments being made to vendors who are not creditworthy, do we evaluate creditworthiness of vendors? No, they're not giving us money. The vendors are not giving us money. This is, again, something we do in the revenue function. This over here is concerned about the purchasing function. So I just basically put words together that sounded good that don't make any sense if you read what they actually say. All right, the final step in the purchasing process is to issue payment to the vendor. In NetSuite, which account do we make this payment? So this is asking making a payment. We're talking about making a payment here. Go all the way back to your original accounting classes. How do you record the payment of something that was purchased on account? What do we debit? What do we credit? We debit accounts payable, good, and we credit cash, okay? So when we make a payment, it's coming from one of those two accounts. Now, it's obviously not coming from accounts payable because we're eliminating the accounts payable. So the payment's coming from cash. Now, that was enough that could get you to this point in the question. Cash is not up there. You say, Dr. Barnes, you're fooling me. I said, no, I asked you what was the account in NetSuite, not what was the account transaction. Which of these is the closest to cash? Checking, okay, that's the answer. So if you remember that the transaction comes from the cash, we pay out that accounts payable from cash, you can make just a small leap to say, oh yeah, the cash account that we used in NetSuite was that checking account. In fact, it was. The rest of these, they're red herrings. All right, refer to the following transaction areas in the NetSuite revenue process. So one of these is correct. The other of these, I use the random function in Excel to reorder them in just random orders. So if you know what the first one is, or if you know what the last one is, this is an easy answer. You don't even need to know the entire process. So let's just talk about these. Which is the very first step that you have to do before you can do anything else? Enter a sales order. Yeah, you can't move forward unless you have a sales order in the system. Okay, entering the sales order is the very first one, which means A is our answer. But let's say you didn't remember that. Okay, what is the very final step? Accept customer payments. Yes, we say, all right, we're going to have the customer pay us because we've done everything else up to that point. If you knew either one of those, this answer, but let's just make sure we know. Okay, enter the sales order. Once the sales order has been entered, it has to go to credit authorization for approval. Once they've actually sent approval, we can ship the goods to the customers. We fulfill the orders. Once we've done that, we say, hey, send us our money. We give this invoice to the customers, and then the customers will pay us. All right. It won't necessarily be that straightforward on the exam. I may ask you a question about this on the exam about the purchasing and revenue. Actually, I won't. That's with the previous exam. All right, but it may give you a little bit more challenging scenario in that situation. But this one, pretty straightforward. As long as you knew one of the first or the last step, you can answer this one easily. All right, so I'm going to move over here to the key. By the way, the key should be available online. Hopefully, you worked on the problems already ahead of time and not just relying on this. But if you need to check your answers, you can. All right, big data is characterized by 5V. 5 words begin with the letter V. What are these 5 words and what are their relevant descriptors? Okay, so 5 words: volume, velocity, variety, veracity, value. Okay, what are the descriptors? What are the adjectives that go in front? So volume is what? Huge. You said high, that would be fine. Velocity. High, yeah, data moves very, very quickly. Okay. Variety. Yes. Veracity. Veracity means accuracy, and there's definitely a lot of accuracy. Believe it or not, people have lied on the internet in the past. I don't know if you knew this, guys, but I thought I'd warn you. Okay. And then value. High, yeah, there's a lot in value. So this is our answers right here. Okay. Huge volume, high velocity, high variety, low veracity, high value. All right, one of the key steps in data analytics is referred to as ETL. What does ETL stand for? Stack, transform, and load. This is our data cleaning and validation process. And basically, that's all that encompasses: extract, transform, and load. By the way, if I ask this question on the exam, these would be worth 2 points each. ETL would be worth 1 point for each letter that you identify correct. All right, listed below are some examples of different categories of information might be developed as a result of data analytics. For each example, identify which type of visualization will be the most appropriate for each type of information presented. So categorical information, what do you guys think? What would be an appropriate one? That's the vertical or horizontal bar charts, kind of our default in Excel, okay? Or those vertical bar charts. We're not talking about ordered information. We're just talking about seeing what the information looks like across the spectrum. So yeah. Geographic location. So geospatial data, that's going to be what? Maps. Maps or symbol maps. Very good. And then percentage of students in each major treatment state, which is proportional information. What would be a good one for this? Pie chart. For Thanksgiving, you had pie. Now you have pie charts. Okay. All right. You can also do a donut chart here. Yes.
If there were to be a question like this on the exam, would you give us the parentheses of the category?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I will specify. What are two types of tasks machine learning is designed to perform? Provide a brief description for each task. So remember, there are two: classification and regression. What do they represent? There's classification that seeks to assign labels, dividing input into output groups, and regression seeks to predict real numbers. Again, you don't have to have that exact description, but it needs to be somewhat close to that as far as what your description be. All right. By the way, for a question like this, if I have two parts, I would usually do 1 point for the answer and then 2 points for the definition. So you see 6 points here, 3 points each, 1, 2 points here. Just to do clarification how I grade these. What are 3 information technology governance frameworks we examined in this course? Briefly define the role of each framework. Okay, so this is 3 points each because there's 9. So this would be 1 point for each of the ones names and then 2 points for what they do. So what was our first one? Starts with a C. COBIT. What does COBIT do? IT governance. Yes, IT governance. IT governance and management. All right. What is our second one? ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library. If you put ITIL, that's fine. What does it do? IT Service Management. Yes, very good. And then what was our final one? ISO 27000 series. Okay. What does it do?
Information security.
Yeah, information security management. Okay, information security management. By the way, just so you know, if you remember the letters but didn't remember what the acronym stood for, that's fine. I'm not going to test you on each of the acronyms stand for. If you don't think I am. No, I'm pretty sure I'm not. Okay. If you do know the names of them, great. But if you don't, that's fine. I just was looking to make sure you do the abbreviations. So very important that you understand the difference between each of these represents. We can go to a lot of depth on them, but I expect you to know the differences between those because you will encounter them in the future. Final question. The primary focus of information security is to provide the balanced protection of data. What are the 3 characteristics of information designed to ensure? And then I gave you a hint. It said blank, 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 triad. What are the 3 letters that go in those blanks?
I can find link playing in your Apple Music.
You activated Siri.
Sorry, Siri. Wow. All right. That was impressive, actually.
Oh my gosh.
My voice is booming. All right. So the letters are CIA, okay, which is not Central Intelligence Agency. Those 3 aspects are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You can't just put CIA here. That was a hint. That was not the clue. Okay. I wanted you to actually identify what the 3 data characteristics are. And this is just 2 points for the identification. You didn't need to define each of these. You just need to. All right. Any questions on the exam? Any questions that I went through that you need some explanation on or any further clarification? We got 2 minutes. We can just talk about life in general. I can let you go early. I'll let you go early. All right. See you on Wednesday for the exam. Have a good day.